Good morning. My name is Chris Fox, and today we're talking about why you probably should not be advertising as an author. Now, I imagine that this title is somewhat clickbaity, and a lot of people are like, well, what do you mean we shouldn't be advertising? We're hearing everywhere that it's pay to play. You need to spend money. You need to advertise. And to an extent, that's true. If you want to succeed at the highest level, it requires ad spend. It does. It absolutely does. So if that's the case, why do I think it's not necessary for most authors? Well, I'm going to break this video into two parts. And the first one's going to talk about why advertising may not be as beneficial for you. And the second part is going to show you why advertising is beneficial for me and people at my level, why I justify spending thousands of dollars a month on advertising. And this video comes about kind of on the heels of the last video, my launching an Amazon bestseller in 2019. I showed how the Magitech Chronicles launch went. And as part of that process, I accidentally showed my Amazon advertising pane, and people got to see that I had already spent $1,700 on the launch just on Amazon alone, and I had only gotten $622 back. And people were like, well, how can you be running at a loss like that? And I'm actually making a very large profit, which I'll explain in the second half of the video. Those numbers are not representative, and you'll see why advertising works for me and why I had to have certain pieces in place before I could make it profitable. But let's get back to you. Let's get back to why I believe advertising is not the best decision for most authors. The reason is simple. There are two parts to marketing. Active marketing is the one that most people focus on. Running advertising, doing newsletter swaps, social media stuff, anything that has you out there kind of, pimping your wares, if you will. That's active marketing. And most of active marketing is expensive. It costs money from you. However, there is another part of marketing, and this is where people start to fall down. And that's passive marketing. Your passive marketing is your Amazon product page or any other product pages you might have, be it Audible or iTunes or wherever else your book is for sale. But those product pages are your passive marketing. And we're talking about things like your cover. Is it the best cover in your genre? Do you compete with the heavy hitters in your genre? In other words, if your cover is next to theirs, does yours look amateurish? And ultimately, only you get to make this decision. But what I found is after I posted last week's video, it was discussed in a few different writing communities. And I'm part of all sorts of writing communities. So, some of the chatter was good. Some of it was bad. Some of it implied that I don't know what I'm doing and I'm blowing money on advertising, which I found amusing. I think those of you who believe that, and you know who you are, will find the second half of this video very interesting when you see just how much profit I'm making from advertising. But back to the passive marketing. If your cover is not equal to those top tier people, if you don't have the same type of cover that I do, like if you're writing military science fiction or space fantasy or anything like that, and your cover looks like it was made in Photoshop, I don't care how much money you dump on advertising, you are not going to sell books. So you can see right up there, that is the cover to Heroborn. and as you can see, looking at this cover, it looks like your creepy Uncle Phil is peering over your fence into your backyard watching like your kids play or something. It's not at all what I was going for. I wanted a sexy hero, and this is what I got. And what that means, guys, is no matter how many thousands of eyeballs I get on this image, I'm going to sell a very low number of books. My conversion is going to be very, very low. I'm not going to get very many people to buy the book. It's just not going to happen. I need to change that cover. So right now, I am running a grand total of $0 in advertising on Heroborn. Zero. I'm not spending a penny on this book, and I haven't in 2 years. Until that cover is replaced, it does not make sense for me to put money into this book because I'm just going to lose money hand over fist. It is really, really difficult to advertise well and to make a profit if you have the best cover, because you still usually need several books in a series so you can get some sell-through, so that'll increase your profit margin. You're going to want to have audiobooks available and paperbacks available, so you have multiple formats that people can purchase from you so you can increase your profit margins there as well. There are lots and lots of pieces you need to have in play. So if you as an author have 2 books out, and both of your covers are okay, like, not embarrassingly bad or anything, but they're just okay. They're not as good as some of the other ones in your genre. Should you advertise? Probably not. maybe a $5 a day Amazon ad or Facebook ad just to get some eyeballs on it to see how well you'll do. But what you're going to very quickly find is that your conversion is not high enough. So let's do some simple math, and I'll keep all the numbers simple so it's easy to understand. Let's say that it takes you 10 cents a click. That's what you're paying for advertising. And it takes you 50 clicks to sell a book. That means that it's costing you $5 to sell a book. Now, if I was selling Heroborn on some sort of advertising platform, I probably could get 1 in 50 people to buy it. So 50 clicks, I'm spending $5, and the book costs $2.99. So I get about $2.09. I've got a sequel, and it's similarly priced. So if they read through it, I'll probably make something like $4. And it's going to cost me $5 to sell the first book in the series via advertising. I will lose money. It's not possible. But what if you turn this around? What if instead of it taking 50 clicks to sell a book, it only takes 10? Because I have a better cover and I've got, an advertising hook, like a question that I ask that is so compelling that people have to have the answer. If I have better marketing copy and I have a kick-ass cover, now I can sell a book in 10 clicks or 12 clicks. And if I can get the cost of those clicks down, now I can do it profitably. So that is when it makes sense for you to sit down and start thinking about advertising. When you've got some Tom Edwards covers, like I do for the Magitech Chronicles and for my Void Wraith series, then you can compete with the people at the very top. Your cover looks like it belongs there. And when you start advertising it, you get the kind of conversion that you're after. But if you're at a point in your career now where even if you have 5 or 6 books, but the covers on those books are not good enough, and you're not 100% rock solid certain that your advertising and marketing copy is really good, if maybe it's just mediocre, then that's going to explain why you're unable to do this profitably, because your conversion simply is not there. And rather than spend your money on advertising and try endlessly to just pour cash into these platforms, which really it's just a sieve, you're just going to throw this money away, you should spend that money to redo your covers. You should spend your time and or money, if you can find a master to work with, teaching you to do better marketing copy so you can learn how to sell this to your audience. Because if you master that skill, if you know who your audience is and what they're interested in, and you can present a beautiful cover and the right language to tell that audience, hey, this is a book you're going to want to read, that's where you start selling copies. And at that point, then you just start turning the dial, and that's where I can afford to spend thousands of dollars in advertising. I mean, it's very likely I'll spend probably, I'm going to guess like $6,000 to $7,000 this month on advertising. That's in the totality of January. And I'll probably make somewhere in the neighborhood of like $23,000 to $25,000 from books. I've got consulting income on top of that, but I'm turning $7,000 in advertising into probably $25,000+ in ebooks. I'm over tripling that money. And that is kind of what you need to be able to do, but you can't do that without the right conversion. And I learned this the hard way. I mean, I launched Behind the Lines and I poured thousands of dollars into it, and it failed. It failed. You can go back on this channel and watch 12 Weeks to a Trilogy and see me doing this in real time. I recorded it. It did not go at all well, and it's because I had the wrong cover. My marketing copy was not bad, but it was not good enough. But in any case, that's going to draw this section to a close. The lesson for you on why you probably shouldn't be advertising is clear. Get that passive marketing right. And then and only then start thinking about it. And ideally, have a backlist. You want 5 or 6 or 7 or as many books really as you can do. The more books you have out, the more profitable it is to advertise. So the second part of the video, this is the part where I'm showing you my screen and showing you kind of the profit that I'm making. If you've got those covers and you've got the marketing language and ad copy kind of dialed in where you want it, if you have that, this next section is kind of for you. And if you don't have it, it can show you what you should be aspiring to. And only when you are at this level, when you have all the other pieces ready to go, does it make sense for you to sit down and advertise. So let's jump in. I'll show you kind of what I'm spending on advertising and the money that I'm making, and you'll see where kind of extra revenue streams are coming in. I wanted to add one more quick segment before we jump into showing my screen. This morning, I was browsing Facebook and I ran across a post from a friend, a fellow author, Micah Krause, and he is, as of this recording, the number 8 science fiction author in the world. And most of this, or a lot of it anyway, is being driven by a box set that he just released. And his is 12 books long, and it's stabilized right around the number 250 in the store range. But here's why it's relevant to you. Micah's not doing any advertising. There's no ad spend involved. He published the book, he let Amazon get a hold of it, they promoted it to people, it had very, very high conversion, and people are buying it in droves. So in the next segment, you're going to see how much money I spent to get my book where it is, which was very necessary. And you can see in other books in my genre, I'm fighting upstream against other similar offerings, but that Micah is doing something that other people are not. I had 4 books, he's got 12. And that's an attractive proposition to a lot of people. 12 books for $1, and he also has the audiobook going alongside it. So you're going to hear me talk about audiobooks a little bit more in the next segment. I'm sure he's got to be selling something very similar. So he's not investing the type of capital that I am and is still making money. And I just want that to be taken positively. So you don't have to advertise to make a hit in this business. It's helping me, and I think that most authors at my level are going to need to use some flavor and amount of ad spend. But Mike is proof that not everybody does. It's still possible to get by in other ways. So I don't know. I'm more optimistic than ever. Anyway, we'll jump into my screen and you guys can see the next segment.
Okay, and this part will be fairly short, but I want to illustrate what I was talking about in the first half of the video, where there are extra revenue streams that are why you can advertise profitably. So you can see I've made so far, we're on the 21st, I've made a little over $10,000 in ebook sales. This doesn't show, however, audiobook sales. Now, if you just look at ebook sales, I have spent almost $6,000 so far in advertising. So just right off the top, if you subtracted that, now I'm down to $4,600 in revenue remaining. And that's, kind of scary. Like if all you're selling is ebooks, I could see where the fear might come in. But I'm not just selling ebooks, I am also selling audiobooks. And I launched to number 534 in the store on the first day with the audiobooks. This is an entirely separate store that Audible runs, but they track ranks very similarly to the ebook store and the paperback store. So there's one for each of those formats. And you can see that I'm doing extraordinarily well, that each day the rank is improved. Now what typically happens is towards midnight the rank starts to jump way up, and then during the middle of the day, it tends to drop. So you can see right now it's at 474, but odds are really good that at the end of the day, I'll probably finish up somewhere around here. And so I'll probably have something around 400 again. So what does that look like? Well, I only have 1 day's worth of sales to show you so far. But the sales from this rank here to this rank here that got us to 400, 125 sales for 1 day. That's all we have so far. It's just 1 day's worth of sales, 125 sales. And this audiobook, based on similar audiobooks that I have, is probably going to pay me, I have a royalty split with the narrator, so it's probably going to pay me about $3 a copy. So every time I sell a copy of this audiobook, I should earn $3 in revenue. This is $375 in revenue for 1 day of audiobook sales. And when you go back to my numbers here, if all of a sudden you're able to add numbers like that in, wow, things start to improve. You can automatically see that things are going to be way better. When we get to the end of this month, odds are good that I'll probably be at like $16,000 or $17,000 in ebook sales, but then you're going to add $5,000 or $6,000 more in audiobook sales. So we're going to be between probably $23,000 and $25,000 in book sales. And at the end of the month, I've dramatically slowed my ad spend. All the big expensive ads that were being run at the beginning have all been pruned, and their CPCs, their cost per clicks are much lower now. So instead of spending, $300 a day like I was on many of these days, I'm now down in the 2 range, and I'm getting it down even lower. So, probably like $175, $150 a day, and that's across all of my titles by the end of the month, which is typically what I spend. But for a launch like this, I tend to ramp up the numbers a lot if I'm fairly sure that's going to help the rank and get the book where I need it to be. So you can see when you start adding in revenue streams, things get a lot more attractive. And when you look at the effect on your backlist every time you have a big hit, so if a book is in the top 1,000, what happens is people will go back to your backlist and will look at your other stuff. They'll pick it up. So if we go to let's say, I can go by genre, let's say post-apocalyptic fiction. If you look at post-apocalyptic fiction, because I have literally no advertising going for this at all, and I haven't for the last year. Oh, my mistake. I have one $5 a day ad running for the audiobook. But for the ebooks, I have no advertising happening. And if you look at this, you're going to see that some months are pretty good. You know, you're getting up into that $500 range. Well, these months correspond to my other releases. So what happened is Spellship came out in February, and all of a sudden my sales rocketed up because people finished Spellship and they went back and they checked my backlist, and then I didn't have a release for a while, and so we fell out of that 250 range. And you can see now I've had a new release, and all of a sudden it's starting to spike upwards again. Remember that we're only 2/3 of the way through the month, so it'll probably be up here, you know, at the $500 mark by the time it's at the end of the month. And this is also true for military science fiction. All of my backlist series typically get a lot more read-through whenever I have a new release. So if you're comparing pure advertising dollars where you're looking at, okay, I spent, you know, $1,000 on this book and I only got $800 back selling that book, there's so many little things that you're not tracking. Like, you know, what is your website traffic? You know, are you getting a lot more views? Are you getting more mailing list signups? Because I'll tell you, I value a mailing list sign up very, very highly because that person is going to go on to buy a whole bunch of books from me. So if I'm breaking even on advertising but getting mailing list signups, it's still a net profit to me. And what you're seeing here is traffic to the Magitech Chronicles website since I started advertising. And you can see, holy crap, we were having days that were what, like 81? You know, there was one down here. I mean, granted, it was Christmas Eve, but, you know, 25. You know, Christmas Day, 128. A big day for me was 222 views. And all of a sudden we're getting like 500, you know, 660, 350, 280. You know, I'm getting much, much higher numbers. People are seeing my site. They're looking at pages. You know, really, they're binging a lot of my content. And so I'm getting so much more than just, oh, I sold a book and I lost a little bit of money on it. I'm getting, you know, people interested in my whole backlist and buying my other stuff and signing up to my lists. And, you know, me as a brand and an entity, I am growing as a direct result of selling, you know, the main book that I'm trying to get through. So that $7,000 in advertising absolutely is well spent. And again, I'm over tripling my money. So advertising can be very, very profitable. But notice I have multiple series that were successful. I have military science fiction, I have post-apocalyptic fiction, I have space fantasy, I've got some incredible nonfiction books that are making a bunch of money, and all this stuff kind of feeds into each other. So for me, advertising makes a lot more sense. But if you're at a point where you have 2 books, and again, just those mediocre covers, and maybe your marketing copy isn't where it is, or where it needs to be rather, then you are definitely better served spending your time and your money getting that stuff top-notch. Be the top of your game. Make sure you can compete with people like me and the people that are at the top of your genre, whatever your genre might be. And know that that doesn't necessarily mean expensive. You don't have to spend $1,000 necessarily to get the best cover in your genre. In your genre, it may be that you can get a cover like that for $200. It really comes down to what your genre is. So like, for example, nonfiction, these covers are very inexpensive for me, and yet they convert enormously well. You know, I think it's like $300 per cover, and that includes the audiobook and the paperback. They're very reasonably priced. So you don't have to spend necessarily a fortune. You just have to make sure you have the right stuff. And if you don't, any form of advertising you do is going to be less powerful, so maybe it should be avoided. But on the flip side, if you do all that stuff right, I wanted to demonstrate that's what I'm doing, that you can make a profit doing this, that you can advertise everywhere and get to a point where the stuff is profitable. It takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of know-how, and more, I believe I probably am going to have to do a course on advertising, which is not something that I wanted to do, but I feel like it's useful and needed, that like a lot of people don't understand the basics of advertising and how it can be applied on every platform. And there are some resources out there, but I feel like I can do a unique take on it. So if that's something you think would be interesting, if you think you'd get some benefit of a moderately expensive advertising course, so we're talking like $100, you know, for an hour of video that taught you the basics of advertising and then spent like 10 or 15 minutes covering each platform and how to use it. If that would be useful, you know, let me know in the comments. I would love to try and get something inexpensive out there to teach people to do what I'm doing, because it can be done. But again, you don't want to even start thinking about that if you don't have the right cover, the right blurb, and the right marketing. So I've rambled on long enough, guys. I do have some writing to get back to. I am currently in the middle of editing The Dark Lord Bert for one final time, and I will be turning that final manuscript over to Lisa for proofreading on Friday, and then that should go live on February 7th. All right, guys, I'm going to get back to the writing. I'll see you next week.